What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. Thank you for tuning in. As always, I am Collin. Figured I would hop on the mic this morning. This is Sunday, August 13th, the day after Iowa Kids Day, and then 2 days after the media days. So I always like this time during fall camp, this weekend, I should say, because it gives us fans and I guess the media as well, just a way to kind of see where Iowa is kind of standing. Now, I get it. It's one practice. You can't really take too much away from 2 hours of practice/scrimmage, but you at least get kind of a sense of different things. Okay, like this looks like it's working, or this player looks pretty dang good, or wow, we really need to work at this position. And then also you can kind of see in the injury standpoint, who's hurt. Is anyone seriously hurt? Is it just a couple guys here or there just kind of dinged up a little bit? So you get that, because you don't really get that anytime else during fall camp, because they don't share that type of stuff, and you kind of go into the first game not really knowing who's playing, who's not playing. So that's what I like about Kids Day. And so I just thought there was enough storylines from yesterday to do an episode. I didn't know if I was going to do one or not. It was kind of in the works, but I kind of wanted to wait and see what all kind of took place yesterday. Now, I was not at the Kids Day scrimmage. I'm just going to share that with you. I'm going to be completely honest. I was not there, but I did follow along. Those 2 hours I had 24/7 open. I had On3, Hawkeye Report. I had Twitter. I had, like, in my office, my three screens, I had all up, and I was just following along. And then obviously afterwards, I watched all the videos that you could find on the internet. The media did a really good job. A lot of the beat writers did a really good job of putting up full highlights and every single play of the scrimmage. So that gave us fans who live too far away. Like for me, I live 5 hours away from Iowa City. Kind of hard to drive all that way for 2 hours of practice, essentially. So yeah, let's get right to it. Let's first start with probably the biggest storyline from yesterday. Obviously, the most nerve-wracking storyline, and that was Cade's injury. Went down shortly, probably an hour after practice kind of started. It was like one of the highest highs to the lowest lows. And what I mean by that is about 10 minutes before his injury, he had that back-to-back, throw to Seth Anderson for like 37 yards, and then that throw to Devontae Vines for, I want to say, like 45 yards. And it was literally back-to-back. Both made incredible catches, good throws by Cade, and you felt like, oh my God, this is awesome. Now I get it. It's one practice, but wow, like we're taking shots downfield. We're actually connecting on these shots. And then like 10 minutes later, and for me, like I said, I'm following along, like update up by update, refresh by refresh. And then it suddenly all of a sudden it's like bam, bam, bam with Cade going down, injured, non-contact. And it almost like you kind of felt like, just like for me, I felt sick to my stomach, because it was like you always think the worst. And for me, when I heard non-contact, went down on his own, you almost feel like, oh my God, this is like a turf monster type injury. Could this be severe? And let's not forget, Cade did have off-season surgery on his right knee, and it looked like on the replay, or what they shared, some writers shared after, the injury happened, they showed what the play looked like. And it was like, oh my God, it looked like his right knee. And man, you just felt like, wow, all this momentum, this excitement, these last 8 months when Cade came, and then, we got some of these transfers, just kind of all came tumbling down. And I get it, overreaction a little bit. Let's wait to see how it plays out. But you know what I mean by, like, you just kind of think the worst. And when you see that happen, you're automatically like thinking worst case scenarios. And it really sucked. But it turns out that it shouldn't be a big deal. Now we'll have to obviously wait and see. But I thought the biggest thing was a couple things that kind of stood out to me is Cade got up immediately, or shortly after he went down. He got up, he walked on his own to the locker room, which I think is, number one, a good sign. And from the sounds of it, a lot of people are saying he wasn't favoring the whatever leg or knee or whatever he got injured on. But I think the biggest thing was he came back out to finish the scrimmage. Now, he didn't play, but he came back out for the last, remaining 20 minutes or whatever, how long left the practice was. And he didn't have, a wrap around his knee or his thigh or whatever. He didn't, he wasn't using crutches. He didn't have a brace on. He wasn't limping. And he was frankly smiling and laughing on the sideline with his teammates. And I think that's a huge sign, because I think for someone who is so ultra competitive in Cade, and that's kind of what you hear, he just wants to be out there. Like he's a very competitive dude. If he knew that this was serious, or like this could be serious, I don't think he'd be on the sideline laughing and smiling. Like, that's just my kind of first instinct with all that. So I thought that was a really good sign. And then obviously Kirk kind of backed it up by saying he's not alarmed by it. We'll take it day by day, which to me, that just sounds like an injury that, you just have to kind of see how it plays out. But I'm recording this on Sunday morning, read the update this morning by David Eicholt. He said he heard from several people inside the program that they believe it's just a quad strain. It's nothing serious, and at most could miss a few practices, but should be back out there. So just very encouraging to hear. It could have been a lot worse. It sucks that it happened, because all the positives from yesterday kind of went down the drain after that happened. So that kind of sucks that it happened, but it could have been a lot worse. And let's just hope that the scare heard around the world yesterday in Hawkeye country, that was the one time it's going to happen. And hopefully the rest of the season, Cade is okay. And, we can rely on, Cade, and obviously, because it's one of those things where Cade goes down, man, like this season, it's all on, having Cade stay healthy. Cause I just don't trust our backups. I don't trust Deacon Hill. I don't trust Joey Labus. And I mean, our defense is going to be good this year, but we saw last year, we saw 2 years ago, you need to have a good quarterback if you want to do anything. And I just don't trust those guys. So if Cade goes down, it almost feels like the season is kind of ruined in a way. So let's just hope Cade is good to go. And, we're still 3 weeks out. So hopefully the most he misses is a few practices. And that's the thing. Like some people say, let's leave him out. But I don't really agree with that, because Cade, although he is a proven quarterback, we saw what he did at Michigan, he is with new players around him. It's all about building chemistry and getting the reps in. And so you need to practice. You need to. Okay, I saw something where I think Kirk said on Big Ten Media, or not Big Ten Media Days, 2 days ago, Media Days, he said like the first practice, there was like 6 false starts. It's things like that you have to work on. It's a bunch of transfers, bunch of new guys in the, inserted in the lineup. You need to build that chemistry. So I hope he's only out for a few practices, because we need him in there getting those reps in. So that is it for that injury thing. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more positive, even though from the sounds of it, the injury, like I said, it sounds like everything is remaining positive with that, but let's talk a little other things that kind of happened yesterday that was very positive. Let's start with the wide receivers. Now, once again, I didn't go to the game, so I didn't walk out of Kinnick feeling good, but I essentially logged off my computer after the scrimmage, feeling pretty good about our wide receivers core. Now, obviously Nico didn't play, but it sounds like he, just kind of dinged up right now. And someone asked him, and he said it was like load management. He's been in the program for 6 years. Can probably maybe take a few days off here or there. Let's not forget that last year he actually got hurt at Kids Day. So maybe that kind of play in the back of his mind, like, let's not play today. Let's not risk it. Right. So, obviously, so with that, so yeah, Nico didn't play, but the other guys really stepped up. And like I said, I feel really, really good. Now, this is if we stay healthy, but I really like Deontay Vines. I said this last year in fall camp, he was having a really good fall camp, and unfortunately he gets hurt and he's out pretty much what felt like the entire year, but it was more like 6-7 games. Came back late October. I think Northwestern was his first game back, and you saw flashes at the end of the season. He made some good catches, and you kind of felt like, okay, this dude, I think, has what it takes. I don't know if he's ever going to be the main guy, but he has what it takes. And then yesterday, arguably the most impressive guy that stood out the entire practice was Seth Anderson, transfer from Charleston Southern, I believe. And I told Tyler this a few weeks ago on one of the first podcasts that we did of the year, or maybe this was back in May. I said, Caleb Brown's getting all the buzz, right? Like everybody's talking about Caleb Brown. let's not forget about this dude who's actually kind of proven. Now, I get it. It was FCS. I understand that. But as a true freshman last year, put up over 600 yards, decent amount of touchdowns. He was offensive player of the year, freshman offensive player of the year in that conference. Like, it's pretty good. And I think we got a steal out of him. And I'm very shocked that not more teams, more FBS level teams didn't go after him. Really, the main three were Georgia Tech, Iowa, and Kansas. And he's from Georgia. So I felt at first that he was probably just going to go to Georgia Tech. So I think getting him was huge. I don't think people are talking enough about him. Now, I think after yesterday, I think more people will. I think people are starting to understand, like, this dude has what it takes to be really, really good for us, even probably more than Caleb Brown. Now, Caleb Brown is more hyped, right? He's coming from Ohio State. But I think Seth Anderson is more proven than Caleb. And I really, truly believe when it's all said and done for this year, maybe not in future years, but for this year, I believe Seth Anderson's going to have a better year than Caleb Brown. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think Caleb Brown's going to have a good year. Now, talking about Caleb Brown yesterday, let's go back to Friday, actually. They asked Kirk about Caleb Brown, and he just said, he's kind of a raw prospect, right? Like, he hasn't really done much at the collegiate level. He had one catch at Ohio State. I think he's from Ohio State. He went to Ohio State, so it automatically puts something in your head that, like, this dude is really, really good. But we have to kind of let it play out, is kind of what Kirk made it sound. And I think, but Kirk did say, now he didn't say this like directly, but he implied that Caleb is a very, very athletic and a really good player. And he's doing very impressive things. And I think Caleb kind of backed up that statement yesterday. Now, you saw flashes yesterday from Caleb, but also you still see how there's still work to do. Like, he got on campus in June. Like, there's still things he needs to kind of sort out, but you saw the flashes yesterday. He made some nice catches. You just see that talent. It's something that we have not really had at Iowa for a very long time, but it's just going to take some time, right? Now, he wasn't on the depth chart and everybody was freaking out. And I said, just wait. He's going to see the playing field. Okay. But overall, though, I really, really like this group. After yesterday, I'm starting to really like this group. Now, we got to stay healthy. It's a position where lately it doesn't seem like we have, but if we can stay healthy, you get a healthy Nico, healthy Vines, healthy Seth Anderson, healthy Caleb Brown, and then you have these other guys now, like yesterday, like Alec Wick, for example. He didn't play. I think he can maybe help out a little bit this year. And then from the sounds of it, the two freshmen that are coming in, Jarriett Bowie and I think Dane Howard from Kansas City. From what I've heard is Jarriett Bowie's has been very impressive this fall camp. So if those guys can step up now, as freshmen, it's going to be really hard for them to see the playing field. Maybe on special teams, it's going to be really, really hard for them to see game action. But in my opinion, though, just having those two guys that are battling is going to just help the group altogether, even if they don't see the playing field this year. And so that's very encouraging to see. Let's go to the offensive line a little bit, talk a little O-line. Now, for me, the O-line yesterday looked okay. I think we have to remember that the defensive line, this Iowa defensive line, is really, really good and really, really deep, even despite not having Noah Shannon. But I do think that the offensive line yesterday, I don't know. I was impressed at times, but there was a lot of times where it felt like, for example, when Cade was out there, it felt like there was times where he had to kind of move out of the pocket or do something because the pocket was collapsing really fast. And I think that's just one of those things where, like, we're only 8 or 9 practices in. Hopefully we can get things figured out. And then, like I said, we are going up against a really good defensive line. So maybe that is some of the reason. But it's one of those things where, like, our offensive line has been so bad the last couple of years that, like, you kind of watch yesterday and you almost kind of feel like, okay, yeah, I'm seeing improvements, but it's still like it's still not quite there. And that's the only thing I'm a little, like, nervous on. But the starting defensive line yesterday was Richmond, Rusty, Logan Jones, Nick DeJong, and Jennings Dunker. I thought having Jennings Dunker on the outside was kind of surprising, but I think I think he's too good not to have him out on the field. What was very surprising to me was Connor Colby was not starting, and Connor Colby, I thought for sure would be starting over Nick DeJong. For me, Nick DeJong did not have a good year last year, to put it nicely. And then yesterday there was a couple plays where he kind of got blown up, and it makes you wonder why he's starting. I don't know. I thought for sure, for me, this is what my starting five would be. If it was up to me, I would do Richmond, Colby, Logan Jones, Rusty, and then Jennings Dunker. And unfortunately, Dejon Parker, that other transfer, fortunately he's still hurt. And I just don't see where he's going to play this year, because he was hurt all during spring. And so far, and who knows, maybe he has practiced a few practices this fall camp, but he was hurt yesterday. So it's like, how is this guy going to see the field if he's constantly hurt? So I think that's going to be probably the starting five. I was really surprised to see Connor Colby not starting, especially after, from what the sounds of it on Friday at media days, was that Connor Colby's a different dude. And then to see him not start was very surprising, to say the least. Tight ends, we didn't really hear much about the tight ends yesterday, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Okay. I think we already know what we're going to get out of Luke Lachey, Eric Gall, maybe Addison Ostrenga this year, Steven Stelianos, who from the sounds of it has had a really impressive offseason. He was a transfer from last year, didn't do much at all last year. And like what Kirk said, he just wasn't ready. And this year he's looking a lot better. So we probably will see him from time to time. But yeah, yesterday, I think it was one of those days where like, we kind of already know what we're going to get out of the tight ends. Let's air it out. Let's throw it to the wide receivers. Let's get that down, because we already have proven tight ends. We know what we're going to get from them. So I thought that was kind of a encouraging thing, just because they didn't really have a big day. Both Eric All or Luke Lachey didn't have a big day. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I think it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that we're airing it out, that we're throwing it to wide receivers, because that's something that we need to start doing, something that we haven't done the last few years. So that was good to see. Defensively, defensive line, it's good. Like it's really good. And you can make the case, well, maybe it's because our O-line's not very good. But no, this defensive line is going to be good. I thought one of the players was the guy that I legitimately a couple weeks ago was thinking about in Brian Allen. I remember when we picked him up, it was in the 2022 recruiting class, kind of the last guy that we got. And I was pretty pumped about it when we got him. And a couple weeks ago, I was thinking to myself, my God, I've not heard of Brian Allen. Now, obviously last year he didn't play, which is not surprising. He's a freshman, but I thought maybe we would start hearing some things about him. And I was very surprised that like there really hadn't been much talk about him. And then yesterday it was like, I started seeing stuff come up about him, about how he's having a hell of a day. And I saw some highlights of what he did yesterday, and very encouraging. Just another player where just adding to that depth at the defensive line, despite, like I said, not even having Noah Shannon out there. But I thought Yahweh Black and what's his name? I can't even think of his name. Oh, Deontay Craig. I thought they looked really good yesterday. Obviously, you have Joe Evans, Logan Lee. Now Craig and Joe Evans barely played yesterday, but when they did play, they looked really good. So linebackers, everyone was freaking out because Nick Jackson wasn't the starter at the on the depth chart, but yesterday he was starting. It's going to happen. Obviously, he's going to start. He was starting at weak side linebacker, and then Jay Higgins was at middle linebacker. Then Kyle Fisher was at Leo. So that's probably going to be the starters. Now, I think it's Carson Shaw. Yeah, Carson Shaw did not play yesterday, and Kirk hopes to have him back this week. And I think he's another guy that's going to be battling for that spot with Fisher. I remember after the spring, or maybe it was during the summer, someone told me that someone in the program said Carson Shaw is going to be really good for us. Now, gets hurt, so who knows, but it's probably going to be Fisher, Nick Jackson, and Jay Higgins, obviously. Secondary, I felt really good about this too. Now, this was one of the biggest things, even outside of the wide receivers. The secondary was one of those position groups where it's like, okay, who's going to be that third guy? Now, we didn't see Cooper DeJean yesterday. He was hurt. Now, once again, doesn't sound like it's serious. Should be back next week or whatever, day to day probably. But I wanted to see, okay, can these other guys, Deshaun Lee, TJ Hall, can these guys kind of step up to be that third guy? Because we're bound to have one of those guys step up this year, whether it's injury, whether it's, we just need someone out there, like it's going to happen. So can one of those guys step up? And I thought yesterday they both played really good. Deshaun Lee had 2 interceptions. TJ Hall had 1. And then Jamari Harris, who was out all of last year, which really sucked, but he had 1 interception yesterday. So overall, secondary, I was pretty impressed by yesterday. And then obviously in the safeties, Quinn Schulte and X. So if we have that third corner that we feel comfortable with, it's only going to help. It's because it's one of those, like I said, what's going to happen at least one time this year during the season where we're going to need one of those guys to step in and step up. And whether it's TJ Hall, whether it's Deshaun Lee, if we can get something out of them, it's huge. So for me, like the biggest thing yesterday, outside of the injury to Cade, of course, was the fact that we were taking a lot of shots down the field. Now, it's practice, so you can do that. It's obviously low risk, high reward. If interception or you don't complete the pass, it's practice. It doesn't matter. So, but I do like that we are practicing that, right? That we are taking shots down the field, because for me, I've always said, if you want to be a running football team, you got to keep defenses on their heels. You can't let them load the box. How do you do that? You do that by having threats down the field, right? You take shots down the field. You connect on those shots. It's only going to make defenses respect that. And at that point, they can't load the box. They can't put 9 guys in the box. They can't put their safeties up, right? And then at that point, you can start running the ball effectively. I've said that's the reason why we can never get the run game going, is because when you have 8, 9 guys in the box, how can you run the football good? When you have defenses that know what's coming because they don't respect your passing game, it's bound not to work. So if we can get that going this year, which once again, under Kirk, you're not going to see it very much. And like yesterday, once again, it was just practice. So that's probably why we saw it so much. But if we can get back to being able to do that from time to time, it's only going to help. Yesterday, and I talked about this in the earlier segment of the show, with those back-to-back plays by Cade, 1 to Seth Anderson, 1 to Vines, both really good catches. I thought the catch by Anderson when 11 on 11, that 11-yard touchdown pass, that was a very impressive catch, kind of caught it in traffic. Just things like that. It was very, very encouraging to see. Now, yesterday, we did throw 6 interceptions. 3 by Cade, 2 by Hill, and then I think 1 by maybe Marco, I think. And 2 of Cade's interceptions, it was not his fault. It was simply the receiver, or I think it was one of them was Eric All, just kind of dropping a pass, and it kind of fell into the hands of the corner or whoever was guarding them. So it really wasn't his fault. But for me, like when I see interceptions during fall camp, I'm not too worried about that. It's one of those things where it's like you almost kind of want to see some interceptions, because that means that you are taking those risks. Now, if they're clear, really bad throws and just what are we doing? That's one thing. But if you're getting picked off by, attacking down the field, things like that, I'm totally okay with that, because that's what practice is all about. So I'm not too worried about that. I know some people were kind of discussing that on the message boards last night about the interceptions thrown and how that does not look good. But I just think it's one of those things where it is practice. So it's it doesn't really matter. Now, hopefully, when we get to game time, when we get to September 2nd, we're playing Utah State, we don't see those mistakes, right? We don't see all those interceptions, because that's one thing that has helped Iowa these last how many years is we don't turn the ball over very much. And then on the flip side, we make a lot of teams turn the ball over. And that's kind of the reason why we've been so good, or at least decent. You go back 2 years ago, 10-2. I always said, the reason why we went 10-2 last year or 2 years ago wasn't because of our offense, obviously defense, special teams. But the one thing about our offense that year, though, is we didn't turn the ball over very much. Petras did a pretty good job of managing the game. Now, yes, last year it was a little worse, because I think at one point Spencer had more interceptions than he did touchdown passes. But that's one thing that you just hope that doesn't happen, obviously, when we get into the season. So, yeah, I think overall yesterday, besides the injury to Cade, very encouraging day. I don't want to take too much out of it though, because it's only one scrimmage. It's only one practice. I remember you go back to last year, Kids Day, the offense looked really good versus our defense. And then we obviously saw what happened throughout the season. So you can't take anything away from it, but at least you can see different things. You can see individual players, like for me, like Seth Anderson, for me, Caleb Brown, Brian Allen on the defensive line. Like you can take individual players and be like, wow, that he looked really good, or you can look at individual units and be like, wow, we really need to work on that or whatever. So, man, I'm excited though. We are officially less than 3 weeks away. We are 20 days away from kickoff, which is crazy to think. And yeah, it's going to be here before you know it. So that will do it for this episode. Very short and sweet, to the point. We'll be back on Wednesday night. Well, I guess Thursday, but we'll be back recording on Wednesday night, Tyler and I, and maybe Colby. I know Colby's going to get on one of these episodes before the season starts, whether it's this week or next week. We'll see. But yeah, tune in to this episode, but then make sure you listen to the episode that will be coming out on Thursday with Tyler. Thank you for listening, and go Hawks.